Yeah, so police have interviewed and released a teenager pending court summons. And there's no doubt discriminatory graffiti is nasty, but what is the harm? Well, let's check in with Alex Ryvchin, who is the co-CEO of the Executive Council of Australian Jewellery. Good morning, Alex.
Good morning.
So why does it matter when we see things like this at a skate park?
Well, I think your guest just then kind of hit the nail on the head. You know, you have families and young children, and, you know, when adults see this stuff, maybe they can take a certain view of it and treat it as inconsequential or trifling, but particularly when you have children exposed to that, it's really harmful. And when you think about the impact it has on communities, when you have young Jewish people seeing graffiti attacking their identity, their history, their tradition, their family, it makes people feel like they're not a part of a community or a society. It's threatening, it's harmful, sometimes it can be terrorizing. There have been instances of graffiti around nursing homes with high proportions of Holocaust survivors as residents. And then we've seen the really extreme aspects of graffiti attacks where we've seen fire bombings of vehicles, homes, childcare centers with graffiti daubed on the surfaces there. So sometimes it can be, you know, a thoughtless act of a teenager thinking they're doing something cool or whatever. But other times it's part of an organized attack by far-right groups or far-left groups. And so it needs to be treated seriously.
And I mean, in the last year, we've seen governments and police focusing on addressing what we're hearing is rising anti-Semitic incidents. So is that working?
Well, in some respects, I think it is working in that we've seen the more severe incidents that happened over the summer, the horrific fire bombings of childcare centers and synagogues and private homes. Thankfully, they've subsided. But I speak to members of the community around the country on a daily basis, and their overall experience hasn't really changed in terms of street abuse when people spot Star of David necklaces or Jewish head covering, the treatment of Jewish students in public schools, on university campuses, in workplaces, in the arts. And what's happening online is particularly harmful and distressing. You're having, you know, this surge of propaganda, disinformation, the spread of ancient conspiracy theories. And that, unfortunately, is really shaping and conditioning the views of particularly young people. So it's a real battle. But since October 7, there's been this outpouring of hatred, and it's unified all different movements, extremist movements, whether it be religious, far left, far right. So the community feels kind of beleaguered and under threat. And that's why when we see graffiti attacks like that, some people may dismiss it as being minor and insignificant, but we view it as part of something wider that's happening in society that needs to be addressed.
And, I mean, as you sort of allude to there, I guess people are horrified with the situation in Gaza and the Middle East, but important not to turn that anger at, say, the Israeli government onto Jewish people?
Look, you know, the Jewish community in Australia was horrified and heartbroken and furious after what happened to Israel on October 7. The scale of those attacks, the rape, the abduction, but you didn't have Jewish people going out and vandalizing buildings or daubing anti-Islam or anti-Palestinian graffiti onto surfaces. It's just not acceptable. If people want to express a solidarity with a particular group that's suffering, they should do so. But there are peaceful, constructive ways to do that. But graffiti attacks, racism in any form, can never be tolerated.
And Alex, in breaking news, the US President Donald Trump has posted on his social media that there will be a ceasefire between Israel and Iran 6 hours from now. What's your reaction to that?
Look, that's really good news. I mean, for the people of Iran and for the people of Israel who've been under this bombardment for days now, it's obviously been extremely difficult. I've spoken to a lot of people who, you know, are in bomb shelters and deprived of sleep, and people who have died and people who are searching for loved ones under rubble. You know, it's a horrific situation. And Iran was advancing to a point where it could have threatened the entire region, the viability of the state of Israel and the free world. And it looks as though if this ceasefire holds, that there's been an extraordinary achievement on the part of the Israelis and the Americans by using targeted force to get to a diplomatic situation which otherwise would not have been possible.
Well, look, terrific to speak with you and get your perspective on all of this, and we do appreciate your time, Alex.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
That is Alex Ryvchin, who is the co-CEO of the Executive Council of Australian Jewry. And as I mentioned, we have had that breaking news as well. So no doubt there'll be more that you will hear about this ceasefire between Israel and Iran over the course of the day. On